Hi, everybody, and welcome to Texas Virtual School Network's online learning conference. We're glad that you could join us for today's session, Must Have Elements to Include in the K-12 Course Design to Help Boost Student Learning, Engagement, and Success, presented by Paula Sanchez. The session will run until approximately 12:30. I'm your host, Barbara Maris. Our facilitator is Taryn Washington. Our captionist is Melissa McClure. And to view the captions, select the Closed Captions button on your menu bar. Sign language interpretation is being provided by Hired Hands Incorporated. And today we have Justin and Tabitha. My assumption is that's Tabitha. Please notice the participant toolbar when you select the participant button at the bottom of your screen. Here you'll find the buttons to raise your hands and use emoticons. Polls may appear on the screens at times, and you can participate in the poll by selecting the number of your choice. The chat window is where you can ask questions during the presentation, and you can find that by selecting the chat bubble at the bottom of your screen. Please note the co-host will be able to view all chat comments. And also the chat window is a floating window, so you could locate it wherever is convenient for you. Finally, the audio button is in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. And if you have a microphone and there's an opportunity for you to use it during the presentation, you're welcome to do so. It will be white and green when your microphone is live. And now I'm going to turn it over to our speaker, Paula Sanchez.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get this session started. I am super excited to be here today and share with you guys this session. So let me see here. Okay, let me make sure I can see. All right. Can you all hear me okay? If you can just give me a yes in the chat box. And if you can see my screen.
Yes to both.
Awesome. Yay.
Love it when it works.
Me too. All right. So again, I want to welcome you to this session. I'll be discussing about must-have elements to include in K-12 online course design. And I've been reading the chat, and you guys were so nice to give some information about where you're coming from and some of what your roles are. So I appreciate that. And to tell you a little bit about myself, again, my name is Paula Sanchez, and I am an instructional designer and an online instructor for a K-12 online school in Florida. And I am also part of a technology integration team and support at our school. And so I do a lot of coaching and support for our teachers who write courses and curriculum for our school. And I've been lucky enough to work with a great group of people who I've been able to share my expertise, but I've also been able to learn a lot from them in the K-12 online course design. And so some of the things I'll be sharing today are taken from those experiences, best practices. And so I gather a few things. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about, but I gather a few things that I thought are important to, to online course design. So whether you're here from the K-12 world or whether you are designing for higher ed, any type of instructional or curriculum or lesson design that you do, I feel like this information you're going to be hearing today, it's applicable to that. So hopefully at the end of this session, you'll leave with some key online course design elements that are going to help you create, develop, and organize your lessons, your contents, in your assessments. And the purpose is obviously to increase in student learning, engagement, and success. And one of the things that, I want to start getting you guys to think is why do we care about course design? Why is it important that I care how my lessons are designed? Why can I not just, I'm a subject matter expert or someone who designs a lesson, I can put just content on a page and the students can see it or read it, right? Well, educators, all of us, and in education, we have the ultimate goal to provide a student a great learning experience. That's our goal, right? That they're learning and that they're successful. And obviously that they are engaged in their learning. And one of the things that I get a lot from working with educators when I'm helping them to build the lesson or whether it's asynchronous or asynchronous lessons, I wanted to know what the goal is, right? And so we talk about a lot about engagement. And when I say engagement, one of the things that I ask is, how do you want to engage? So I want to ask you guys, what are some things that come to mind when you hear the word student engagement? What are some of the things that come to your mind when you hear student engagement? Fun? Yep, they're doing their work, they're motivated, focused, active learning, actual learning taking place, interactive, excited, retention, absolutely, digging deeper. Ooh, I love some of these things, on task. Absolutely. Those are some great things that we think when we come to student engagement, learning. We want them to be involved. We want them to collaborate, to be motivated. So I wanted to start getting to, before I go into my elements of design that I wanted to show you, I wanted to talk about engagement because I feel that although we all have our ideas about engagement, there are also some misconceptions about engagement, and it happens especially when we're trying to think about how we're designing those lessons, how are we building those lessons. And so I want to talk about three especially, engage, again, your mind thinking about student engagement. And I wanted to tell you that engagement is not entertainment. Okay, let's make that clear. And so we're not in the business to entertain learners. We're in the business to make sure the learning is happening, correct? So we're not there to make, and I know this might sound harsh, but it's not about, I want my students to have fun. Not all learning needs to be fun. Okay, and sometimes we're very hard on ourselves when we're thinking we got to make this fun, otherwise they're not learning. Please do not think about that. Do not think about engagement as something that needs to be entertainment. Okay, so when we think about that, that's going to start making your mindset into how am I going to make my lesson engaging. Okay, so let's keep this one in mind as I continue to the next one. Engagement does not mean that your students are learning, okay? And I'm going to tell you why I say this. One of the things that happened is that when we want to make our lessons super engaging, are we really thinking about what we want the outcome to be? What's the learning outcome? What's the goal for that lesson? Okay, so we need to think about that before we think, okay, let's make it fun. Let's make it, it needs to begin absolutely with an end in mind. This is something that we need to think about it. And I'm going to give you a quick example. Think about a child, a student, a young person that is really engaged in a video game. Okay, they're truly engaged, 100%. Are they learning? So think about this. If I say, I'm going to play this video for my student because I'm going to keep them engaged, right? Okay, well, was that video really purposeful for the learning that you wanted to happen? Okay, so you see where I'm coming from now. We need to make our learning purposeful. If the video is absolutely going to make that learning happening, then yes, absolutely. Keep them engaged on that video and their learning is going to happen. But don't think that if you are going to work so hard to make this lesson engaging, are you really thinking on the end in mind where you want the learning to happen? All right. So that's number two. Number 3, what engagement is not. Engagement does not happen the same way for every learner and every subject area. Okay, so when I work with my teachers who, anywhere from music, art, math, history, world languages, we view engagement in a completely different way. What engages a student in math might not be so engaging in art or music. And the same thing happened for our learners. So we need to think about our learners get engagement happen in a completely different way for them, where they're either listening to an audio, watching a video, reading text, engaging in an assignment. Engagement happens in a completely different way. So when we work so hard to build those lessons, we need to make sure we're thinking about our learners first. Sometimes you're not engaging everyone the same way. And that's hard sometimes to put together when you are presenting a lesson online, because you are trying to build something, and it does take a lot of work and effort if you want to present different modes of information so that you're engaging all those different learners. But this is something that we need to make sure that we're thinking about it. And I love this comment. There is an assumption that students are engaged when they're in a computer. That is absolutely another misconception right there. But I love that you guys are adding these comments and adding to this conversation, because this is exactly what I wanted you to start thinking about as I present these design elements. It is all about differentiation, but guess what? We can do it. We can provide that in our online environment, and we don't necessarily have to kill ourselves. We can do that in very many different ways with our in different ways. So that's what I'm going to be presenting today. So I went and I was trying to find a way to, or a definition, different definitions for student engagement, because we all view engagement in a different way. So I found this one, and the reason I chose this one is because I see some keywords in here that were actually, you guys mentioned earlier. So this one talks about a student engagement referring to the degree of attention, curiosity, interest, optimism, passion, level of motivation, learning, and progress. And those are all the things that we look for when we're designing a lesson. We definitely want to keep those attention. We want their curiosity. We want to engage them in critical thinking. We want them to be interested on what they're doing and what they're learning. We want them to stay positive what they're learning, and we want them to have passion and motivation so that they're able to learn and progress. So those are things that when we think about student engagement, they all come together. Okay, so let me ask you something before, again, I move on to my design elements. What are some other ways that we can present content or lessons to students besides what we do in an online course? So think about all the ways that you guys would present information to students. Anything that comes to mind when you think, okay, you provide a Kahoot lesson, okay, voice thread, acting it out with a co-teacher, video clips, project research, absolutely. Watching the news, yep. Inquiry-based assignments, project-based learning, great. Yes, so one of the things that there's many ways when we are in an online environment that we present, oh, I love that one, discussions. Absolutely. We engage them in lessons, in discussions, in assignments, in quizzes, in assessments, in emails, announcements, different types of things that we are, seminars, projects. So the reason I ask these questions is anything that you're going to be hearing from now on, these are things that you can apply to all those things that you work on with your students. See, these same principles are applicable to any instruction, any design you provide for your students. Absolutely. Breakout rooms with prompts, any collaboration projects you do with your students. Okay, so I want to start with the first one, and I want to talk about navigation and course information. And when you think about these, I want you to think about when you first present the student with information. So again, whether you're creating a project, a breakout room, a discussion, whether you're activating prior learning, or you're doing any of those activities that you do. One of the things that is critical that we provide is we need to make sure that we are providing enough instructions and directions for students to start their work. Whether they are starting brand new in your course, whether they're opening a lesson, whether they're opening a unit of study, whether you gave them an assignment, it is super important that they're able to navigate and find the information you want them to find easily. This is not a this is not necessarily a puzzle that you're not giving them a something to hunt for. You want them to access that information because learning needs to happen, right? So here is, and I just put it here an example. So our online courses have home pages, or maybe it's the introduction to your lesson. And you want the students to either use, get to their grade book, get to the syllabus, maybe get to the units, read your announcements. And it is so important that you provide them with those information, especially in our online environment. They are on their own sometimes. And even if you're doing blended learning, where you're giving them an assignment or a lesson, and you're trying to get them to own their learning, you want to make sure you set them up for success and set them up for a great start. So here on my left, I have an example. Welcome, I'm so happy you're in my course. Let's get started. Well, here we're not being very helpful, because if you're having the student to guess how to begin, guess how to start a lesson and not even know, and you might say to yourself, where my learning management system might have a link right there for the lessons. They should know that they need to go to lessons. Let's not assume so many things when we are giving students, when we're getting them started. Let's give them instructions. Let's be clear. Where do we want them to go? Where do we want them to link? Provide those links. So in the right-hand side, you see information on maybe adding links for them to how they're going to contact you if they need help, how are they going to get to their grades, how they're going to get to the course syllabus. That first encounter with your students, whether you're introducing a lesson or a course for them, is super important. Let's think back again to engagement. Let's think back again to learning and success. We want them to be successful. So let's make sure that when we are providing them with this information, that we are setting them up for success by giving them the right instructions for navigating your lessons, for navigating the course. Is super important. All right, so here is a sample, and this is actually a real course. And so I came up to this because when I was reviewing this course, I was trying to find out, one of the things is, okay, so I come here, let's pretend that this is your learner, and whether you created this lesson because you are face-to-face with the learner and they are accessing these online, or whether they're fully online and they're accessing these at home. So if you think about it, is your learner going to know exactly what the expectation is for this video, or even how to get started, or what this lesson is all about? Absolutely no. Absolutely no. And then again, we're talking about K-12. Okay, so this is actually a I think it's a K-3 content lesson. And one of the things that I struggle with this is we want to set clear expectations. So for example, an advice here, I have a video. The first thing you want to tell the learner, how is this video linked to the learning goal? What is the goal with this video? So maybe you want to say, let's remember that in this unit, we're reviewing this type of information. Our goal is to, and you want to link that to your outcome. With this video, I want you to do this and that. If you want them to take notes during their video, write them down. Tell them how to take notes. Tell them that you want them to pay attention to certain things in a video. I will highly suggest adding how long the video is. So they're planning their time. They're planning. You're giving that, again, is starting them successfully in a lesson. Believe me, that's going to lead to success, okay? That is going to lead to engagement. The moment you tell the student why they're watching the video, students always want to know why. Why is this? Why am I watching that? What am I going to do? Even if you're in a face-to-face classroom, you don't just put a video and let them go, right? You absolutely guide them through the process and guide them through the outcome. So this is something that, again, I highly recommend. Time. One thing, and I'm not going to get into accessibility here, although I touch on that a few times during this session, is we need to make sure we're providing access to our students. So for example, if you need to tell them how to access a closed caption of the video, if you need to guide them, for example, add a text file of the video, that is super important. You're going to be addressing a lot of your learners right there. Another thing that I highly recommend to my teachers when they put a video, tell the student before they even watch the video that they're allowed to pause it at any time. And not only that, sometimes they, whether they need to ask a question, and you can always say, pause your video if you need to pause it and maybe, add notes. You can rewind if you need to see it again. We forget those instructions that are so critical to student learning, because sometimes they watch it and for some reason they forget that they can just go back or pause it. And so again, important details to include when you're adding these audio visuals for students. Same thing for any type of interaction that you add on your lessons. And I love that you guys are mentioning that, you got to make sure that you're adding those closed captions and transcripts. They are critical. So again, super important to add those directions. Here is another one on an assignment. And so I love this one because we are adding steps. We're telling them what to do, what their job is. We tell them what, what they're going to do afterwards. And one of the things that I highly recommend, and I'm going to mention this a little later, is you want to tell them, you want to add encouragement notes in there. And you also, if you feel that your lesson is somewhat challenging or there is something, tell them they're about to encounter a challenging lesson. You want to make sure that you're building those mindsets, that you're building that ability to know that it's okay, that they're taking a risk, that it's okay to make mistakes, that they can go back into their lesson and they can try. Those are things that we are that are super important to add. Again, directions on everything that you're repeating your directions or that you're doing too much. Sometimes I even tell my teachers, look, if you find yourself that you're adding the same comments on your, for example, when you're adding videos to your lessons, that is okay. Create a general statement before a video that you can copy and paste when you build your lessons. You can do those things and make your time more efficiently when you're designing. Create just general instructions. Don't think because you said it on day one that you cannot put it later on, when school is way in half of the semester. You could always add and repeat. This is called also reinforcing learning, which is super important. This is a great segue. So I'm actually talking now about reinforcing. I am huge on reinforcing. And one of the things is, remember that how do our learners learn? It's all about repetition. It's all about reinforcing. It's all about repeating the learning that is happening. And so I want to talk about a couple of things that I highly recommend when you are creating a lesson. One is to have an overview of your lesson and a summary page of what your student just saw. So a summary of your lesson, a summary of your unit, a summary of the module that they just saw. And so what I mean by that is there's a huge benefit about providing a summary, an overview page and a summary page. So I'm giving you two examples here. Let's talk about the one on the left. This is a K-5 classroom. And the teacher obviously is a teacher who offers several subjects. So in her overview page, she highlights the learning goals and objectives for lessons. And you notice that in the left-hand side, the page of the left-hand side, you have different subjects. So she divided by subjects, and she told the student on the overview at the beginning of whether it's a week, whether it's a unit, what they're going to be learning. So she tied that to the learning objectives. Super important to reinforce those learning goals and your learning objectives. Remind them what they're doing. So you see language arts, math, and then you see science and social studies. So when your learner comes in here, everything's in one page and that information is there. They know what's coming. You are preparing them and setting them for that. This is going to help, again, on your engagement and your learning. Now, if you see on the right-hand side, this is another page that of the overview page, and this teacher decided to do it by days. So she's telling them on day one what the expectation is, and it could be this one is as clear as you're going to be seeing these content pages, and here is the assignment that you're completed on day one. On day two, she added the assignment, and you see some vocabulary, key vocabulary and concepts that they're going to be learning in day two. And again, ideas for preparing those overview pages. And I have seen them where the teacher prepares an overview page for an entire unit that could be covered in 3 weeks. So you know what? It really helps the learner. And for those students who have learning guides, such as parents, it's so helpful for those parents to come and see what their parents, what the student is going to be seeing. And they're going to be so grateful. And you could always, you know what the beauty of this is? If those questions come back to you, you could always say, let's go back to the overview page. You guide them to go there so that they know how to prepare for that week, for that unit, for what's coming. I believe I have another example here. This one is another, and this teacher decided to do it by days. So it's very, it's specific on what's happening on Monday, what's happening on Tuesday, what's happening Wednesday, and every day of the week. Yes, absolutely. Pacing guides are super important. This is something that, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, Melissa, because I feel like our students, our online learners, or kids in general, they're really good when they have a schedule, when they have a routine, and when they have the spacing guides, so that you're able to say, here is what you need to be doing. They love due dates. They love that. And sometimes we can help them stay engaged and stay on task when they have those spacing guides. And it also helps them plan. And, we're building those 21st century skills as well. I tell my students all the time, look, you're owning your learner and you need to organize your schedule. This is real life skills. We all do that. We all need to make sure that we create our schedules. We know what's going on. We know what's coming. Here are a couple examples of summary pages. And so let me start with the one on the left. So the one on the left, it's wrapping up some announcements, maybe something you want to feed forward for what's coming. And this one is the one that I like a lot. It's at the end of your unit or week, you make sure you tell them, did you submitted this task? Did you completed this task? And yes, you can continue. So it's a reminder of the student of the things, maybe the things they have to complete to continue, or maybe things they completed. So it's a reminder, again, reinforcing what they just learned. The one on the right-hand side, I actually love because this particular teacher used that to compliment students, to give them, say, great job, you're doing a great job. Our online learners need that. Remember, sometimes they don't have the teacher face-to-face giving them kudos and telling them how great they're doing, but we can use these pages to actually provide those type of information, especially when they're wrapping up. So as a summary page is great to add. Thank you for working so hard. Then this one added a couple questions, again, reinforcing what they just learned, some activities that they just learned, and it reminds them some of the vocabulary. Sometimes these summary pages really help our learners prepare for an assessment, maybe something that's coming later on. So use the summary pages, again, to meet the needs of your subject, the needs of your courses, the needs of your learners, but there's a lot of ideas that that you can provide that information. So again, you want to make sure that, and I'm not sure, Michelle, if this is what you're asking, but one of the things that I've seen happened, I've seen teachers add a student of the week sometimes in here, and maybe celebrate some student work and things like that. So summary page, you could definitely do some celebrations and see and do it that way. And if you create a routine, students look forward for those things. Am I going to be on the student of the week board? And so you're able to provide that. And I love, Melissa, you're saying you provide that in the grade book and comments. Absolutely. When you're providing those feedbacks, adding a summary of what they just did or they learned, it's a great idea. Anyway, this is a great segue again. You guys are awesome. You guys are guiding my lesson very well here. But so what else can you do to reinforce expectations and outcomes in your course? And how else can we provide those reinforce for a student? And again, you guys some of you mentioned, providing pacing guides, providing them in the feedback. I love the digital badges. Absolutely, Monica. That's another way that I've seen that at the end of units and lessons, providing students with some celebrating badges that they can do. Modeling and reminders, so huge. I love the weekly emails for students. Again, all these type of interactions and communications, these are things, all of these that I'm sharing with you today, you can use it for any of these interactions that you have with your ideas. Very good. Checkpoints, those are critical. You're reminding, giving students, providing students with checkpoints is one of the things that I recommend my teachers all the time. Checkpoints, you're reinforcing knowledge, you are reminding them, and it's also a way for them to say, maybe I didn't get that one. Let me go back to my lesson. So again, great thing to do. You guys are awesome. I love your comments. I love your ideas. And I love how you are providing these for all of us. We definitely take learning from each other. And so thank you so much for participating in these. I'm going into a subject now that it's very extensive, but I'm going to touch on it because I think it's important, and it's the structural features. And sometimes when we're building our lessons, we could really go, some of us, love our lessons to look pretty and engaging, and, we talked about this at the very beginning, and we want to add all kinds of stuff. And so I want to talk about structural elements because I think it is important. Remember that in online learning, your student is getting their first interaction with the content is visual, right? They're going to be reading, viewing content. So definitely taking things into consideration for structural elements. Now, what do I mean by structural features? So let's talk about the one, font size. So when we create our lesson pages, we want to make sure that our students are reading the content and that our students stay on that page and that we try to put all that information in there. Something that I recommend, highly recommend, and this to me is a no-no, and I'm going to tell you why. And you might say there's nothing wrong with this page. The moment that you make your font on one page 5 different sizes, your students going to have a hard time recognizing what is it important here. Sometimes we try to emphasize things and making visually appealing. One of the things that I highly recommend is do not do that with font. Maybe having 2 different font sizes in a page, that's good enough. We don't want them to be distracted by the font. We want them to actually get into content, get into that learning, read the content, correct? And so we don't want to distract students. We want them to stay engaged on what matters, the content that you're putting in there. So keeping maybe a couple font sizes, that way if you are trying to emphasize with actually the font size, then they can understand that something is a header versus the actual content. So pay attention to that. Again, just touch a little bit into accessibility. We want to keep our content pages and our text accessible for students. Do the minimum with your font when you are creating, especially when you have a lot of text in one page. It could be very distracting to a learner where they're trying to figure out why is content in 5 different sizes. So something to think about. The next one, which I'm really big on, is on font color. This is not to make it fun. We need to make sure the learning is happening. And sometimes, again, some of these colors are not even accessible. We want them to make sure that if you are going to emphasize content in a color, keep it consistent throughout your course. So if you are making your content pages and maybe anything that is a vocabulary word that is important, you make it red or blue, then your student is going to get into the habit that anytime there is a red word, it means an important vocabulary. Their eye is going to go there. Maybe their attention is going to go there. Sometimes we try to emphasize a paragraph. You can make that bolded. Absolutely. Let's think about all those type of students who maybe have some special needs. We are making a disservice for them. We're hindering their learning when we are thinking, oh, I'm going to make my lesson so much fun and I'm going to add 10 colors in there. Absolutely. So let's think about all this because it's important. And again, I can go really deep into the structural elements, but I wanted just to add this as a reminder that this is not how we want to add emphasis. This is not how we want to add engagement for our learners. The next one is headers. And so one of the things that I see a lot sometimes is we forget about headers in our content pages. And I'm going to tell you why headers are so important. The same information you're seeing on the right side box is the same content that's on the left-hand side. Now, which one looks better? Which one would you think it's more attractive to the eye? Which one do you think your student will find easy? Absolutely, the right-hand side. For one, headers, you can use headers to structure and organize and even chunk your content. Super, super helpful when we are using headers to chunk content. So, for example, if I want to read about gloves before I read about personal protective equipment, I'll go to the bottom one and I can read, and I know that specific paragraph is going to help me find what I'm looking for. And I love what you said specifies what they're looking for. Headers and images too. Absolutely, yes. And I'm talking about images in a second, but absolutely. Look at that. It absolutely links that information to what they're reading. And at the bottom of this page, you actually see a checkpoint that was added to this page. So then again, we want to make information that use headers in a way that's going to be useful for your learners. This again goes into accessibility again because it's super important. Our screen readers work with headers. So those learners are also going to benefit there. Absolutely. So you're addressing so many important instructional strategies when you are using these instructional elements the right way. So one of the things, and we mentioned this before, is image support. Here is another one. Please use images to support the content that you're presenting for students. Images we love, and I'm guilty of these. I love my pages to look beautiful, my lessons to be, and we start adding all kinds of decorations using images. So what happens when our learners find 5 images in our pages? We want to use images to connect them to what they're learning. And so one of the things that is super important is that we provide them, this example right here, this is sort of like a small image, but the point that I wanted to make with this is we're talking about equipment and supplies. There's a picture of equipment and supplies. Students are going to be making a connection. If I were to put a teddy bear here just because I want to decorate my page, or maybe I want to put a happy face in here just because I want to put a happy face, that might not be linking my learner to the learning. Okay, so those are things that we want to make. We don't want to distract. We want to add it to our instruction, and adding to our instruction using images is super, super important. Absolutely. And I loved, thank you. Yes, it should be aligned content text, not below or at the top. I love that suggestion. Okay, so I am going to move on in here, and because I want to talk a little bit about, I did talk about videos before, but one of the things that happens when we're creating our lessons and we're adding all kinds of interactions and maybe things that the students need to be linking to, or a game or a video, we want to make sure that we're providing options for our students. So if you put a video and again, you want to make sure that you check those links, that this is not going to deter their engagement, that they're going to get to that page and the link is going to give them options. I am a parent of a full-time, has been a full-time virtual student for the past 4 years. And he goes into a video that the first thing I hear, Mom, my video is not playing. I remember, a few months ago, he came to a video and we were having internet connections issues and he wasn't able to play the video and he needed to turn in homework. Well, I couldn't help. It was the internet connection at the place we were, so he couldn't access it. Well, I remember an hour later, he came and said, I'm done. And I said, oh, did you fix how did this happen? And he said to me, Mom, the video, there were some, the text script of the video was below the video. I was able to read that, answer the questions of my assignment, and submit it. And that just reminded me how important it is that we add options for our students. If you're having an activity where the student needs to be watching a video, you want to make sure that there are options. Are they going to be able to read the text if it's not playing? Is the site something that they're going to be able to access easily? So think about those ways to provide options for students. For student frustration, it's terrible because that's going to, again, think about our engagement and our learning that we want to happen. So we don't want them to be frustrated. So anytime you are creating some sort of interaction, audio-visual, visuals into your lesson, keep that in mind. All right, we talked about this earlier, and when we were talking about summary pages. And one of the things that I encourage teachers to do when they're designing or putting lessons together is there are two things that need to go into a lesson. One is celebration. Whether it is at the end of that lesson, at the end of the assessment, add that comment, add the celebration. Sometimes we're not there that. And also you want to add encouragement. It is okay to struggle. We need to teach the students, and we can do that in online learning too. We can tell them that it's okay to struggle. And so we can, either add that comment, if you struggle with this assignment, here's what I want you to do. Don't, you want to make sure you set them up for success. But at the same time, you want to make sure that if they were able to accomplish the learning goal, that you're celebrating with them. And believe me, they love those little celebrations that we did. Super, super important. It's, I love what Melissa said, having the teacher voice in online, we don't lose it because we're online. It's there. We need to make sure that it's there. Sometimes we have our learning management system or whatever is our lesson leads allow us to add a recording. Maybe it's a great time to put your voice in there, add that comment that the student can click on play and listen to, or maybe something that they can see and kind of celebrate. So let's not forget about that, because again, that is going to help your students. Those little things are things that add to their learning and success, and they're so happy when they know that they were able to accomplish something, and somehow they hear that online teacher voice there celebrating or encouraging. Okay, so I want to ask you, why would you think it's important for us to add those type of messages for our learners? Why is it important? Tamara, yes, building relationships. It's that ability to, we are being personal. They are feeling that there is, we're humanizing online learning. We're motivating them. We're encouraging them. Remember that when we're not in face-to-face with them, if they're able to read in there and see and feel that there is a teacher encouraging them and cheering them on, absolutely adds to that motivation. And remember again that our goal was learning success and engagement. So putting those are definitely going to add those little things. And you guys can do it in many different ways. You already said how sometimes you send weekly emails, how you add that on your feedback. So there is different ways that you can add that in your online instruction. So love those ideas that you guys are adding. So let's move on to options. And I feel like we have touched on this throughout this session, but options and support for all learners. Here is another one that I feel it's an element that is super important and applies a lot to not only when we're delivering the instruction or building those lessons, but also when we are assessing our students or creating assignments or work that they're going to submit to us. So one of the things that we are going to help our learners is to provide them options. So I'm going to give you an example. I love that I can say to my students, if they have a project, that they have options for submitting these, whether it's a written, whether it's recording their voice, maybe they want to record a video, maybe they're great, they love drawing, and that's how they want to submit that. So this is options that you are going to be adding into for all of your learners. Giving them the option is going to provide engagement for them. Why? Because I'm not going to be frustrated that, oh, the only option I have is to write this. And I hate to write an essay. Is there another way I can present this information or this learning to my teacher. And the moment you're allowing them to provide that in other ways, absolutely, this is universal design. You're hitting into something that it goes deeper for our learners. And I feel that it is super important. And absolutely, you make a good point. Too many options can be overwhelming. So here is something very important, and I love that you made that comment. One of the things we want to do is we want to be, yes, we provide options, but we want to provide direction for them to limit the overwhelm that they're going to get. Okay, so if I want them to provide, if they're working on a project and you're going to give them, if you give them 3 options and you're very specific on how they're going to provide that, that's why we have rubrics. And that's why remember about steps and providing them with resources. It is very important. And believe me that once you do that, it's going to provide your learners with an ability to represent their knowledge in different ways, which is going to help you assess what they're really learning. Okay, if your students are not great writers and they're presenting work to you that they probably was very poorly done, not because they didn't understood, but because they don't like writing, is that really an accurate assessment of their knowledge? Maybe not. So you want to make sure that you're providing those options. Again, some assignments lead to them. Some assignments might not lead to that, but it is something that we want to provide for our learners. And the same thing happens for when we are delivering lessons. And so when we're delivering lessons, we want to do the same thing. And again, that was mentioned earlier, if you have a video, provide the text. Sometimes I have teachers, and I'll show you that in a second, who record a page. They record their voice so they can not only listen to the teacher while they're reading, so you're providing those different options for students. I want to show you this lesson because I love what this teacher did. And so here, there are a couple things I want to emphasize. One is the way that the page or the content was chunked or presented or organized. So she said, you're going to start here. And then she tells them to click on the headings below. So she presented the lesson with, here's what I do. Here is what we do. Here's what you do. And at each of these tabs, there was information and resources for the lesson. She presented the lesson and allowed them to, so she taught the lesson on the I do, and then she reinforced the learning on the we do, and then she added, okay, now you do it. But here is something that I love about here. For those students who went through this lesson on the first 3 tabs and still struggle with the concept, she added additional practice. So this was okay. So you still need a little bit more practice going here, and here is your additional practice. And for those students who got it and wanted to, move a little bit farther, and she wanted to challenge those, she added an enrichment. So I love what this presents because it allows the opportunity for you to reteach, but also allows you to move those students who are getting it and need a little bit of enrichment and want a little bit more to provide that. So I love that, students were able to, you're gonna push those that are needing that enrichment, but you're also going to be supporting those who need a little bit more help. And so that is something that I wanted to show you this because, and somebody mentioned about the learning objective. Yes. Anytime that you can reinforce a learning objective in any of your pages, remind the learner why they're doing something, remind them what the outcome should be. That is great. Here is the example, what I was telling you about the audio. So this particular teacher, she recorded this page, and this is actually I believe it's like a first grade first grade PE class. So she was able to add her voice in here and read this information to learners. So I thought that was pretty cool that, they are listening to that information, especially those young learners. They love to do that. And she tells me that, sometimes she add little messages in there. And so they love to come in here and click on play and listen to her talk. So anyway, I just wanted to show you an example of that. Okay, so I want to move on to another element. And this one is about the learner ownership. And this is one that it's kind of something that I encourage my teachers to allow those learners to own their own learning. And I call it the I versus you. And one of the things that I see a lot when I'm reviewing lessons and content is that as a teacher, we tend to write assignments and content using the I, right? Because we're there writing and we want that voice to be out there. I want you to write 5 sentences, and that is the task, right? Well, when you are in online learning and I'm the learner and I say, I want you to write 5 sentences, all I'm thinking is on the task that my teacher wants me to do. We want to switch these to your goal should be to write 5 sentences. We want them to own that learning. We want them to know that their job is to complete that task because it's going to help them. You could use words such as your challenge is, your goal is, your, you can definitely, you're about to engage in an amazing adventure. These type of comments where you allow them to, it's all about them. It's all about them and not about what you want them to accomplish, if that makes sense. So that is something that I want to make sure that we understand. We are running out of time here. I am doing my last element here, which is all about assessment and feedback. This one goes back about back on the directions. So one of the things I advise on quizzes and assessments is that we are very clear on the directions, but we're also very clear what do we want them to submit, how do we want them to submit it, provide the steps, label the steps. Not just write everything in a paragraph. Steps, think about a recipe. When we follow a recipe, aren't we great when they tell us what we're doing in a step 1, a step 2, a step 3, and how it needs to come out? Sometimes providing simple is super great here. If you're doing an assessment or a quiz, tell them what type of questions they're about to encounter. How long is the quiz? Things like that, because that's going to set, again, your student up for success. That's going to tell them it's not a guessing game. We're trying to assess their learning. So telling them that they're about to answer 20 multiple choice questions is not bad. We could do that in online learning. Remember that sometimes we're not there face-to-face to provide these instructions. So you don't want to lose their attention when they're trying to provide when you're assessing their learning, whether it's an assignment or a quiz. Super important to add specific instructions. What is the expectations? Expectations need to be clear. And I want to end the session with survey. Your students are the most powerful thing you have to improve your instruction. Their feedback is super important. Your ability to gather data through assessments or through survey is super important. So use that information to improve your instruction, to improve your online teaching practices. And that's all I have to say. I hope you guys have enjoyed this session. I know we are on time here, but I hope a lot of these ideas and elements are going to make your online instruction much better.
That was fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Thank you again, Paula, for a fabulous presentation. And the certificate will be up on the My Agenda Join session page. And to access a recording of this session, please visit the conference tab on the conference homepage and click on View Recorded Sessions. Transcripts of each session are also available, and they will be posted there as well. The next session will begin at 1:45 p.m. Central Time, and it's entitled Put Students in the Driver's Seat of Their Learning Experience. And I hope to see all of you in there then. And thank you so much. And again, Paula, it was an awesome session, just jam-packed full of lots of useful information. Thank you.